He saved two Apache sisters from the cold, but never expected what they would ask the cold that night was deeper than usual, the kind that cut through clothes and settled into the bones. Daniel drove slowly along the narrow mountain road, his headlights slicing through the falling snow. The road was almost empty, as it usually was in winter. Most people avoided this area after sunset, especially during storms. Daniel knew this road well. He had lived near these mountains for many years, long enough to respect their beauty and fear their silence. He was coming back from a small town where he had gone to buy supplies. His old truck rattled as it climbed higher, tires crunching over ice. The radio played softly, but Daniel barely listened. His mind was quiet, heavy in a familiar way. Since his wife passed away years ago, nights like this often felt longer. He had learned to live with the loneliness, but it never truly left him. As he turned a bend, something unusual caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just shadows moving in the snow. He slowed down, leaning forward, squinting through the windshield. Then he saw them clearly, two figures walking along the side of the road. Daniel's heart skipped. No one walked this road in winter. He stopped the truck and stepped out, the cold biting his face immediately. The wind was sharp, carrying fine snow that stung his skin. As he got closer, he realized the figures were two young women. They looked exhausted. Their hair was damp with snow, their clothes thin and not meant for this weather. One of them stumbled and the other quickly held her up. "Hey," Daniel called out, keeping his voice calm. "Are you okay?" The women froze for a moment, fear clear in their eyes. Daniel raised his hand slightly to show he meant no harm. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "It's too cold to be out here." The taller one spoke first, her voice shaking. We didn't know where else to go." Daniel noticed their hands were red and trembling. One of them was wearing worn shoes, the other's feet were wrapped in torn cloth. The sight made his chest tighten. "Please," he said gently, "get in the truck, you're freezing." They hesitated, exchanging a look. Trust did not come easily to people who had been disappointed before. Finally, the shorter sister nodded. They followed him to the truck, climbing in carefully as if afraid the warmth might disappear if they moved too fast. Daniel turned the heater up and grabbed a spare blanket from behind the seat, handing it to them. As the warm air filled the cab, both women began to shiver even harder, their bodies reacting after holding the cold at bay for too long. "My name is Daniel," he said as he drove. "What happened out there?" "I'm Lena," the taller one replied. "This is my sister, Mariah." Mariah nodded weakly, her lips pale. "Our ride broke down miles back. We waited, but no one came." Daniel frowned. He knew how dangerous that could be. "You shouldn't have tried to walk in this weather." "We didn't have a choice," Lena said quietly. He didn't push for more details. He knew when silence was better than questions. After a few minutes, Daniel pulled a thermos from the cup holder and poured warm tea into the lid, handing it to them. "Small sips," he said. Mariah wrapped her hands around it, sighing softly as she drank. That sound alone told Daniel he had done the right thing by stopping. His cabin wasn't far, just off the main road, tucked between tall trees. As they arrived, the storm grew stronger, snow falling thicker and faster. Daniel helped the sisters inside, the warmth of the small space instantly wrapping around them. The cabin was simple. Wooden walls, a small kitchen, a table with 2 chairs, and a fireplace that Daniel lit almost every night. He added more wood to the fire, watching as the flames slowly chased away the cold. "Sit close," he said. "You need to warm up slowly." The sisters sat near the fire, blankets wrapped around their shoulders. Daniel went to the kitchen and heated soup on the stove. The smell filled the room, comforting and familiar. As they ate, the sisters slowly began to relax. Color returned to their faces. Their breathing steadied. Daniel watched quietly, feeling a deep sense of relief. He had seen what cold could do to people. Tonight could have ended very differently. "Thank you," Lena said softly, meeting his eyes. "You didn't have to stop." Daniel shrugged. I did what anyone should. But they both knew that wasn't true. Many cars had likely passed them by. Later, as the storm continued outside, Daniel prepared a small sleeping area for them using spare bedding. He insisted they take the bed while he slept in his chair near the fire. "You saved us," Mariah said before lying down, her voice filled with emotion. Daniel shook his head gently. "Just rest." As the cabin grew quiet, Daniel stared into the fire. He thought about how close the sisters had been to real danger. He thought about the road, the cold, and the choice he made to stop. He didn't know it yet, but that choice had already changed something deep inside him. That night was more than a rescue from the cold. It was the beginning of a connection he never expected, on a road where he once believed nothing new could happen again. Outside, the wind howled, but inside the cabin, there was warmth, safety, and the quiet beginning of a story that would stay with them all forever. The morning light broke slowly over the snow-covered mountains, filtering through the small cabin window. Outside, the storm still raged, but inside the fire crackled softly, filling the room with warmth and a comforting glow. Daniel stirred as the smell of cooked oatmeal and tea filled the cabin. He had been awake before dawn, preparing a simple breakfast for the sisters. Lena and Mariah were already sitting near the fire, wrapped in blankets, their eyes still reflecting the shock and exhaustion of the night before. "Good morning," Daniel said softly, trying not to startle them. "I made some oatmeal. It will warm you up." The sisters nodded quietly. Mariah, the younger one, smiled weakly as she took a spoon. Lena remained quiet, her gaze fixed on the flames, her thoughts hidden behind a calm but guarded expression. Daniel knew that silence could be a shield for those who had faced hardships before. He remembered his own younger days and how hard it could be to trust someone new. They ate slowly, the steam rising from the bowls warming their hands as much as the food did. Daniel watched them carefully. He could see how carefully they moved, as if every action required extra thought because their bodies had been through so much the night before. Neither spoke much, but the quiet was not uncomfortable. It was a space where they could simply exist without pretending, without forcing words that didn't come easily. After breakfast, Daniel brought out a thermos of hot water and some tea. He set it on the table. "Drink as much as you like," he said. "It will help you feel better." Lena finally spoke, her voice soft but clear. We should explain why we were out there. I know it seems strange." Daniel nodded. "Take your time, I'm listening." Lena took a deep breath. "We were traveling back from visiting relatives. Our car broke down miles from anywhere. We tried to get help, but the roads were blocked and no one passed by. We had to keep walking, or we might not have made it." Her voice trembled slightly, not from fear but from the memory of the cold and exhaustion. Mariah added, "We didn't want to bother anyone, but we didn't know where else to go. We just kept hoping someone would see us." Daniel nodded slowly. "I'm glad I was there, but I want you both to rest now. The storm isn't letting up yet. You need strength for what comes next." The sisters looked at each other, a quiet understanding passing between them. They had never met Daniel before, yet something about his calm presence made them feel safe. It was a strange feeling, trusting a stranger so quickly, but the night's ordeal had made fear and suspicion secondary to survival. As the morning passed, Daniel and the sisters settled into a quiet routine. He fetched more blankets, checked the fire, and made sure they had enough food and warm drinks. Lena and Mariah took small steps around the cabin, testing their strength and regaining warmth in their limbs. Every small movement was an achievement after hours of exposure to the cold. Daniel noticed how careful they were, their eyes alert to every sound and every shadow. Once they were slightly more comfortable, Lena began to open up further. "We don't usually travel alone," she said. We lost our parents years ago. It's been hard to keep the family together and safe. Sometimes we have to rely on ourselves more than anyone else." Daniel listened intently, not interrupting. He could see the weight of responsibility she carried. and he could understand, in his own way, what it meant to lose people you love and to have to stand alone. Mariah, sitting on the edge of a chair near the fire, added softly, "People don't always see us the way we hope they would. They see two young women and assume we can't handle things, but we've had to learn to be strong, whether they believe it or not." Daniel nodded, feeling a mix of admiration and sadness. He knew what it was like to feel invisible in a world that often ignored you. "You're both very strong," he said gently. "Not many people would have made it through last night. And yet here you are, sitting in front of a warm fire, alive and ready to move forward." Lena and Mariah exchanged a glance. There was a moment of quiet recognition, as if they realized that Daniel truly understood not just their words but the feeling behind them. The connection between them deepened, built silently on trust, empathy, and the shared experience of surviving something difficult. The storm outside raged harder now, snow piling against the cabin walls. Daniel checked the windows and the roof, making sure everything was secure. He moved with a quiet confidence that only years of living alone in harsh conditions could bring. The sisters watched him, noticing the care and attention he put into every small task. It wasn't just about survival, it was about creating a space where they could feel safe, something they hadn't felt in a long time. After a while, Lena asked, "Why did you stop for us? Most people they would have driven by. Why did you care?" Daniel paused. He didn't answer immediately. He looked at the fire, watching the flames dance and flicker. "I don't know if it's about caring," he finally said. "I just know that someone needed help, and I could provide it, that's all." Mariah nodded, sensing that there was more to his words, though he didn't say it aloud. She could see in his eyes a history of loss, loneliness, and quiet acts of kindness that rarely received recognition. Lena's expression softened as well. There was something about Daniel that made them feel protected, not just in body but in spirit. As the hours passed, the sisters began to share more stories. They talked about their childhood, growing up in a small Apache community, learning traditional skills, and facing challenges that required both courage and patience. They spoke of hardships, family struggles, school difficulties, and the constant need to prove themselves in a world that often overlooked them. Daniel shared some of his own experiences as well. He spoke of losing his wife, of the long years of solitude that followed, and of the quiet satisfaction he found in helping others, even in small ways. There was no pity in his words, only honesty and reflection. The sisters listened, intrigued and comforted by his openness. They began to see him not just as a stranger who had saved them from the cold, but as someone who understood the struggles of life, even if his experiences were different from theirs. The morning turned into afternoon. The storm continued outside, but inside, a small sense of normalcy returned. Lena and Mariah began to move more freely, helping Daniel tidy the cabin, fetching firewood, and setting the table for a simple lunch. It was a small act of cooperation, but it brought a feeling of purpose and routine that had been missing from their lives for too long. During lunch, Lena asked a question that had been on her mind. "Do you ever feel alone, even when you're around people?" Daniel looked at her carefully. "Yes," he said quietly. "I think everyone feels that sometimes, but being alone doesn't mean you're helpless. It just means you have to find strength within yourself. And sometimes it means accepting help from others when they offer it." Mariah nodded, understanding more than she let on. The sisters had spent much of their lives relying on themselves, but in this cabin with Daniel, they were learning that accepting help didn't make them weak. It was simply part of being human. The storm outside began to slow, snowflakes drifting more gently to the ground. Daniel opened the window slightly, letting in fresh air, and the sisters watched the world beyond the cabin walls. The mountains looked beautiful and serene, even in winter. For a moment, they allowed themselves to feel hope, a feeling that had been rare in their lives. As the day drew on, Daniel brought out some extra blankets and prepared a small area where the sisters could rest. He encouraged them to lie down, to relax, and to let their bodies recover fully. Lena and Mariah exchanged grateful smiles, realizing that Daniel's care extended beyond simple survival. He was teaching them to feel safe, to trust, and to regain strength not just physically but emotionally. Before nightfall, Daniel checked the fire one last time. The cabin was warm and the sisters were asleep, curled under blankets with peaceful expressions. Daniel sat quietly in a chair, staring at the flames. He thought about the events of the past day, the cold, the fear, the walk along the mountain road, and the decision to stop for two strangers. He realized that helping them had changed him too. It reminded him of the importance of human connection, of reaching out even when it's inconvenient, and of the small but meaningful impact one person can have on another's life. He glanced at the sleeping sisters and felt a sense of quiet pride. Not for the act of helping itself, but for the trust they had shown him. It was a trust that could not be earned quickly, yet it had been offered freely after a single night of shared hardship. Daniel understood that these moments of vulnerability and care were rare and precious, and he intended to honor them. Outside, the snow continued to fall gently, coating the mountains in a pristine blanket of white. Inside the cabin, warmth and light created a small sanctuary, a place where survival had become the foundation for something deeper: connection, trust, and understanding. For Daniel, Lena, and Mariah, the storm was no longer just a test of endurance. It was the beginning of a bond that neither distance nor circumstance could easily break. As evening approached, Daniel quietly prepared dinner, giving the sisters a chance to wake naturally and eat when they felt ready. They moved with more confidence now, their steps no longer hesitant. The shared experience of survival had given them strength, and they were beginning to trust in the kindness of a stranger. By the time the fire dimmed, Daniel reflected on the day. It had been one of the most unusual mornings and afternoons he had experienced in years, yet it was also one of the most meaningful. The storm had forced them together, but it had also created space for understanding, empathy, and respect. He realized that sometimes, the coldest and harshest moments could lead to the warmest and most lasting connections. The storm had finally begun to lessen by the next morning, though patches of snow still drifted lazily across the mountain slopes. Daniel looked out the cabin window, noting how the road ahead was partially visible now. He could see the faint tracks of their trek from the night before, half buried by fresh snow. The sight made him pause, remembering the two young women walking helplessly in the cold. It was a memory that stayed with him more vividly than any other in recent years. Inside the cabin, Lena and Mariah were awake, wrapped in blankets and sipping warm tea. They had moved slowly that morning, careful not to disturb the calm of the cabin. Daniel had prepared breakfast as usual, but there was an unspoken tension in the air. Both sisters seemed to hesitate before speaking, as if they had something important on their minds but weren't sure how to say it. Daniel noticed immediately. He had learned over the past day that silence could hold as much meaning as words. He sat across from them at the small kitchen table, stirring his own coffee, waiting patiently. Finally, Lena broke the quiet. "Daniel, we need to talk to you about something," she said softly, her fingers nervously twisting the edge of her blanket. Daniel set down his mug. "Of course, you can tell me anything." Mariah looked at her sister, then back at Daniel. "It's not easy to say." "We weren't sure how to ask." Daniel leaned forward slightly, his expression calm and encouraging. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together. You don't have to worry." Lena took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "You helped us when we had nothing, when no one else stopped for us. You gave us warmth, food, and a safe place to sleep. And for that, we are grateful. But there's something we need, something we cannot do alone." Daniel's curiosity was piqued, but he stayed quiet, allowing her to continue. Mariah spoke next, her voice steadier now that her sister had started. Our family, we are trying to save our land. It's been in our family for generations, but we've been struggling to protect it. People don't take us seriously. They ignore our rights and sometimes they try to push us aside. We've tried, but we're not strong enough to fight it alone. Daniel frowned, trying to understand the full weight of their words. I see. That sounds very difficult. But what exactly do you need from me? Lena's eyes searched his face for understanding. We need someone to stand with us, not just for a moment, but for the process. Someone who can speak when we are ignored, who can help us navigate the places where people do not listen to young women like us. We are asking if you would help us. Daniel felt a weight in his chest. He had expected gratitude, a simple thank you, or perhaps a goodbye once they were ready to leave. But he had not expected a request that would draw him so deeply into their lives. He thought about the effort, the time, and the emotional energy it would require. Helping them meant stepping back into a world he had kept at a distance since his wife's death. It would mean involvement, responsibility, and a connection he wasn't sure he wanted to reestablish. He looked at Lena and Mariah, seeing the sincerity in their faces. They were not asking for money, for charity, or for something easy. They were asking for belief, support, and the courage to stand together against a world that had often been unfair. Daniel paused, weighing the decision. The thought of walking away brought an uncomfortable emptiness. He thought of the two young women, exhausted and alone just 2 nights ago, relying on nothing but hope. Could he refuse them now, after giving them warmth and shelter? Could he turn away from the same people who had trusted him so quickly? Finally, he spoke, his voice measured but firm. I will help you, but you must understand that this will not be easy. There will be setbacks, frustrations, and times when it feels like the world is against you. Are you ready for that? Both sisters nodded immediately, relief washing over their faces. We are, Lena said. We've had to fight our whole lives. We can handle the challenges if we have someone like you with us. Mariah added softly, we just need someone to believe in us when no one else does. Daniel felt a strange sense of purpose stirring within him, something he had not felt for a long time. Helping them now was not just about protecting land or documents. It was about giving them strength, hope, and the chance to reclaim a part of their lives that had been slipping away. The next day, after the storm cleared completely, Daniel prepared to take the sisters to the nearest town. The roads were still slippery, and the mountains were treacherous, but they moved carefully, with Daniel driving slowly and deliberately. Lena and Mariah sat quietly in the truck, watching the snow-covered world pass by, their thoughts clearly on the task ahead. When they arrived in town, Daniel guided them to the local offices and government buildings where they needed to submit documents and meet officials. From the start, it became clear how challenging the process would be. Some clerks barely looked at them, dismissing their concerns as unimportant. Others questioned their authority to speak on behalf of their family land. Daniel realized immediately that his presence was not just helpful, it was crucial. People who ignored or underestimated the sisters could not ignore him as easily. Over the next few days, Daniel accompanied Lena and Mariah to appointments, meetings, and document submissions. Each day was filled with small victories and frustrating setbacks. Forms would be rejected for minor technicalities, officials would misplace papers, and sometimes the sisters' patience frayed. But Daniel remained calm and steady, guiding them through each challenge and reminding them of their goals. During quieter moments, the sisters opened up more about their lives. They told Daniel about their parents, their early struggles to keep the family together, and the traditions and skills that had been passed down through generations. They shared stories of community events, celebrations, and moments of joy that had been overshadowed by hardship. Daniel listened, feeling a deepening respect for their resilience and character. One evening, after a particularly long day of meetings, they returned to the cabin. Lena and Mariah were tired, their faces showing exhaustion and frustration. Daniel sat them near the fire, helping them warm up with blankets and tea. "You've done more than I expected," Lena said quietly. "I thought this would be impossible, but with you here it feels possible." Daniel smiled faintly. "It's never easy. But sometimes the right people show up at the right time. You've worked hard to get this far. I'm just helping you continue the journey." Mariah looked at him, her eyes reflecting gratitude and something deeper, trust and belief. "It's strange," she said softly. "2 nights ago you were a stranger to us, and now it feels like you're part of our journey, part of our fight." Daniel nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Helping them had already changed him in ways he had not anticipated. He had thought he was simply providing assistance, but the process was giving him a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time in many years, he felt that his actions mattered beyond himself. Over the next weeks, their routine became a rhythm of resilience. Days were spent in meetings, paperwork, and legal processes. Nights were spent in the cabin, sharing stories, reflecting on progress, and planning next steps. Daniel witnessed the sisters grow stronger, more confident, and more capable of speaking for themselves. He realized that his role was not just as a helper, but as a supporter, a witness, and a reminder that they were not alone. Despite the challenges, small victories became moments of joy. A form finally approved, a meeting that went smoothly, or a clerk who listened respectfully all added layers of hope. The sisters began to smile more naturally, their eyes no longer shadowed by exhaustion or fear. They laughed together, shared small jokes, and even teased Daniel gently when he grew too serious. The cabin, once a temporary shelter from the storm, had become a place of connection, learning, and growth. Daniel reflected on these days, realizing that helping the sisters had also helped him. He had rediscovered patience, empathy, and the quiet satisfaction of meaningful work. He had been alone for so long, and yet, through these 2 young women, he had found a sense of community and purpose that he thought he had lost forever. Then, one evening, Lena approached him with a serious expression. "Daniel, we need to ask something more of you. It's important, and we wouldn't ask if it weren't necessary." Daniel set aside his work and looked at her, attentive. "Tell me," he said calmly. Lena took a deep breath. "We need someone to be with us for the long process ahead. Not just for today, not just for the meetings, but for everything that comes after. People often ignore young women like us, and sometimes we feel invisible. We need someone to help us be seen and heard, someone who believes in us." Daniel felt a surge of emotion. He had expected gratitude, perhaps even relief, but he had not expected a request so personal and significant. The sisters were asking him to be part of their lives in a way that required trust, commitment, and courage. He paused, considering the weight of their request. It would not be easy, but as he looked at Lena and Mariah, he knew that he could not refuse. They had trusted him before when survival depended on it. Now, they were asking for belief, guidance, and solidarity. He realized that the right answer was clear, even if the path ahead was uncertain. "I will stand with you," Daniel said firmly. "Every step of the way, we'll face the challenges together." Relief and gratitude filled their faces. For the first time in days, they smiled without hesitation. It was a smile that carried hope, determination, and trust. And for Daniel, it was a moment of quiet triumph, not just in helping them, but in rediscovering his own purpose and humanity. The storm had brought them together, but it was their shared determination, trust, and courage that would guide them forward. Daniel realized that sometimes, helping someone else did more than save them, it saved himself too. After weeks of navigating appointments, paperwork, and endless meetings, Daniel realized that helping Lena and Mariah was more challenging than he had anticipated. Each day brought new obstacles, from officials who misplaced documents to rules that seemed unnecessarily complicated. Yet, the sisters never gave up, and Daniel stayed with them every step of the way, guiding, advising, and encouraging them when they felt overwhelmed. One morning, Daniel woke early and brewed coffee, the aroma filling the small cabin. Outside, the snow had melted slightly, leaving the mountain roads wet and slippery but passable. Lena and Mariah were already awake, preparing themselves mentally for another day of challenges. Daniel could see the determination in their faces. They were tired, but they refused to show defeat. "You both look ready," Daniel said, smiling softly. "Let's get this day started." The sisters nodded. Mariah carried a small folder containing the documents they had collected so far, while Lena held a notebook filled with notes from previous meetings. Daniel loaded the truck carefully, double-checking that nothing was forgotten. They drove slowly down the mountain road, the quiet of the morning broken only by the soft hum of the engine. Their first stop was a government office that had previously dismissed their requests. The clerk barely glanced at them as they entered, assuming they would leave quickly. But this time, Daniel spoke firmly, introducing himself and explaining the sisters' situation. "They have every right to be heard," he said calmly but decisively. "I'm here to support them." The clerk hesitated, caught off guard by Daniel's confidence and presence. Lena and Mariah followed his lead, speaking clearly and presenting their documents with precision. The clerk, realizing he could not dismiss them this time, listened attentively and began processing their requests. After the meeting, Daniel drove the sisters to another office where more complicated paperwork awaited. The process was slow and exhausting. Forms had to be filled out correctly, signatures needed verification, and officials required proof of details that the sisters had already provided multiple times. Lena's patience was tested, and Mariah's energy waned as the hours passed. Daniel noticed their frustration and stepped in to calm them. "We're making progress," he said gently. "It may feel slow, but every step counts. Don't lose heart." The sisters nodded, taking a deep breath and continuing their work. Daniel admired their resilience. He had witnessed people give up after only minor setbacks, yet Lena and Mariah faced repeated challenges without losing determination. Their courage reminded him of why he had agreed to help in the first place. After several hours, the sisters began to relax slightly. They had completed one of the more difficult steps in securing their family land, and it was a small victory, but an important one. They stopped for a brief lunch at a nearby cafe. Daniel ordered soup and sandwiches, making sure they had something warm to eat after the long morning. As they ate, Lena spoke quietly. "Daniel, I don't know how we would have done this without you. You've stood with us when no one else would. It means more than I can say." Daniel shook his head. "You've done the work. I'm just here to help you get your voice heard, but I'm glad I can be of assistance." Mariah added softly, "It's not just that you help, it's how you help. You don't treat us like we're incapable. You treat us like equals, like people who deserve respect." Daniel felt a warmth in his chest at their words. He had not realized how much his presence could affect them beyond practical assistance. It wasn't about showing power or authority. It was about giving them confidence, validating their efforts, and standing as a witness to their rights. The afternoon brought more meetings and challenges. One official questioned the authenticity of some documents, while another delayed processing because of missing signatures. Each obstacle required patience, careful explanation, and steady support. Daniel remained calm, guiding the sisters and helping them remain focused. By evening, they returned to the cabin, exhausted but hopeful. Lena and Mariah moved slowly, leaning against the warm walls and settling near the fire. Daniel prepared a simple dinner, setting bowls of soup and bread on the table. The sisters ate quietly at first, savoring the warmth and comfort of the cabin after a long day. Once they finished eating, Lena spoke again. "Daniel, we've been through so much in these weeks, and we've seen you stand by us, even when it's hard. But it's not just about paperwork. We've realized something important. You've shown us what it means to trust someone, to believe that there are people who care, even when the world seems cold." Daniel looked at her, understanding what she meant. He had never expected that helping them would create such a profound connection. It wasn't just about survival or legal work. It was about building trust, giving hope, and restoring faith in humanity. Mariah added, "We've learned so much from you. Patience, courage, and the importance of standing firm. We're not just fighting for land anymore. We're fighting to be seen, to be heard, and to have our rights respected. And you've shown us how to do that." Daniel felt a sense of pride mixed with humility. He realized that the sisters were teaching him just as much as he was teaching them. Their resilience, determination, and courage in the face of repeated challenges reminded him of the importance of connection and empathy. Over the next few days, the trio continued their work. Each day brought new obstacles and victories. Daniel accompanied Lena and Mariah to meetings, helped them prepare documents, and offered guidance when they faced frustration. He also encouraged them to speak up for themselves, reminding them that their voices mattered. One afternoon, after a particularly long day, they returned to the cabin and Daniel suggested a break. "Let's take a moment to breathe," he said, settling into his chair. "You've worked hard. Let's enjoy a little calm before we continue." Lena and Mariah nodded, sinking into the blankets near the fire. The warmth and light of the cabin created a small sanctuary, a place where they could recover from the stress of the day. Daniel watched them, realizing that this simple moment of peace was just as important as any legal victory. As evening approached, Lena spoke again. "Daniel, we've been asking so much of you, and you've given without hesitation, but we need to ask something else. Something that may be even harder." Daniel set aside his cup of tea and looked at her attentively. "Tell me," he said. Lena took a deep breath. "We need your support for the long term. This process, it's not going to end quickly. There will be more meetings, more challenges, and more moments when people don't listen. We need someone to stand with us, to believe in us, and to guide us when things get tough. Will you continue to do that?" Daniel thought for a moment, weighing the request. It was more than he had anticipated. It would require time, effort, and emotional investment. But as he looked at the sisters, he knew the answer. They had trusted him when they had no reason to, and now they were asking for belief, guidance, and solidarity. "I will," he said firmly. "I will stand with you every step of the way. We'll face the challenges together no matter how long it takes." Relief and gratitude filled their faces. For the first time in days, they smiled fully, without hesitation. It was a smile that carried hope, determination, and trust. And for Daniel, it was a moment of quiet triumph, not just in helping them, but in rediscovering his own sense of purpose and humanity. In the days that followed, their work continued. Each meeting, each document, and each challenge became part of a shared journey. Daniel guided, encouraged, and supported the sisters, while Lena and Mariah grew stronger, more confident, and more capable of standing for themselves. They learned to navigate the complexities of bureaucracy, to assert their rights, and to trust that their voices mattered. Evenings at the cabin became moments of reflection, storytelling, and quiet joy. They shared meals, discussed their progress, and planned for the days ahead. Daniel realized that this journey was about more than saving land. It was about building confidence, restoring faith, and creating bonds that would endure beyond the immediate challenges. One night, as the fire crackled and the cabin grew warm, Daniel reflected on the past weeks. He had come to the mountains expecting a quiet life, alone and routine. Instead, he had found purpose, connection, and a reason to care deeply about the lives of two young women he barely knew at first. The storm had brought them together, but it was trust, courage, and determination that kept them united. Lena and Mariah had changed too. They were no longer simply two sisters struggling against the world. They were fighters, confident in their abilities, and empowered by the support and guidance Daniel had offered. They had learned patience, resilience, and the importance of standing firm, even when others tried to push them aside. As Daniel watched them by the fire, he knew that the process was not yet complete. There would be more challenges ahead, more obstacles to overcome. But he also knew that together they could face anything. The bond they had formed was strong, built on trust, respect, and shared experience. In that quiet cabin, surrounded by snow-covered mountains, Daniel, Lena, and Mariah had found more than survival. They had found hope, strength, and the beginning of a lasting connection that would guide them through the challenges yet to come. Months had passed since the night Daniel first saw Lena and Mariah struggling through the snow. The mountains had shifted through seasons, but the cabin remained a constant place of warmth, safety, and trust. Over the weeks and months, the sisters had made incredible progress. With Daniel's guidance, they had navigated countless bureaucratic challenges, filed necessary documents, and persistently attended meetings with officials who had once dismissed their claims. It had been exhausting work, but the determination in Lena and Mariah never wavered, and Daniel's steadfast support had kept them moving forward. One crisp morning, Daniel awoke to the soft light of winter sun filtering through the cabin window. He brewed coffee and set a small pot of tea on the table. Lena and Mariah were already awake, packing their folders and reviewing notes for what they hoped would be one of the final meetings to secure their family land. There was a quiet excitement in the air, mingled with the familiar tension that came with anticipating an important day. Daniel looked at them with quiet pride. "Today might be one of the last steps," he said softly. "Are you ready?" Lena smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting both nervousness and hope. "We're ready. We've come too far to turn back now." Mariah nodded in agreement. "It's been a long journey, but we've learned so much along the way, and we've had you with us, Daniel. That has made all the difference." Daniel felt a warmth in his chest. He had never expected that helping two strangers would create such a profound connection, or that their journey would change him as much as it had changed them. The stormy night when he first stopped the truck seemed like a distant memory, yet it remained vivid in his mind, a reminder of how a single decision could alter lives forever. The drive to the town was quiet. The road was clear, the mountains bathed in sunlight, and the snow glistened like tiny diamonds. Daniel drove carefully, mindful of the winding roads and icy patches. Lena and Mariah reviewed their notes quietly in the back seat, preparing themselves for the meetings ahead. There was no panic, no fear, only focus and determination. Their first appointment of the day was with a senior official who had previously delayed their requests and challenged their documentation. Lena and Mariah approached the desk with confidence, presenting their papers and calmly explaining their situation. Daniel stood nearby, ready to support them but allowing them to speak for themselves. For the first time in months, the process moved smoothly. The official listened attentively, asked clarifying questions, and, most importantly, treated them with the respect they deserved. When the meeting concluded, Lena and Mariah exchanged a glance, their expressions filled with relief and quiet joy. "This is it," Lena whispered to Daniel as they left the office. "It finally feels like we're getting somewhere." Daniel nodded, smiling. "It's a big step, but there's still work ahead. Let's stay focused until everything is officially complete." The next few days were a blur of final meetings, paperwork submissions, and confirmations. Each step required attention to detail, patience, and perseverance, but the sisters' confidence continued to grow. They had learned to navigate the bureaucracy with skill and poise, and Daniel had become more than a guide. He was a pillar of support, a steady presence in moments of uncertainty. Finally, the long-awaited day arrived. Daniel accompanied Lena and Mariah to the office where the final documents would be signed and their rights formally recognized. The atmosphere was tense but hopeful. Officials reviewed the papers one last time, double-checking signatures and verifying details. Daniel watched closely, aware that this moment represented the culmination of weeks of effort, courage, and determination. After what felt like hours, the clerk finally looked up with a smile. "Everything is in order," he said. "The land is now officially recognized under your names. Congratulations." Lena and Mariah could hardly contain their excitement. Relief, joy, and disbelief washed over them simultaneously. They hugged each other tightly, tears in their eyes, before turning to Daniel. "You did this with us," Lena said, her voice trembling. "You believed in us when no one else did. You stood with us when it mattered most." Mariah added, "We couldn't have done it without you. This isn't just about land. You've given us confidence, strength, and hope for the future." Daniel felt a lump in his throat. He had helped them, yes, but the real achievement was theirs. Their courage, persistence, and refusal to give up had brought them to this moment. He smiled warmly. "You earned this. I was just here to help make sure people listened. You both showed incredible strength." The sisters' smiles lingered, a mixture of gratitude and triumph. They spent the rest of the day taking care of remaining formalities, making calls, and confirming details. By evening, everything was complete. Their family land was secured, protected, and recognized. As they drove back to the cabin, the sun setting behind the mountains cast a golden glow over the landscape. Lena and Mariah were quiet for a while, absorbing the enormity of what they had achieved. Daniel glanced at them in the rearview mirror, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. He had never imagined that one snowy night would lead to such a meaningful journey, not just for the sisters, but for himself as well. Back at the cabin, the three of them sat near the fire, exhausted but happy. Daniel prepared a simple dinner, and they ate together in companionable silence. The warmth of the fire, the aroma of the food, and the shared sense of accomplishment created a comforting, peaceful atmosphere. After dinner, Lena spoke softly. "Daniel, I know we've thanked you many times, but I don't think words are enough. You didn't just save us from the cold. You gave us hope, strength, and belief in ourselves. You've changed our lives forever." Daniel shook his head, touched by her words. "I didn't do anything extraordinary. I just stopped and helped when it was needed, but I'm glad that it mattered. That's enough for me." Mariah smiled, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "It's more than enough. You've given us something no one else could: trust, guidance, and a reminder that kindness still exists in the world." The three of them sat quietly for a while, watching the flames dance in the fireplace. Daniel reflected on the journey they had taken together. The stormy night that had brought them together, the long days of paperwork, the moments of frustration and exhaustion. It had all led to this moment of triumph and connection. In the following days, Lena and Mariah prepared to return to their family home, ready to rebuild their lives and continue the legacy of their ancestors. Daniel helped them pack, making sure they had everything they needed for the journey ahead. There was a sense of bittersweet anticipation in the air. Their time together at the cabin had been brief but transformative, and saying goodbye would not be easy. On the morning of their departure, Daniel drove them down the mountain road one last time. The sun was rising, casting a warm light over the snow-covered landscape. Lena and Mariah looked out at the view, taking in the beauty and serenity of the mountains they had come to know so well. Before leaving, Lena turned to Daniel, her eyes filled with gratitude. "We will never forget you, Daniel. You saved us in more ways than one. Thank you for believing in us." Mariah added softly, "You gave us more than warmth and safety. You gave us hope, courage, and the confidence to fight for what is right. We will carry that with us always." Daniel smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. "Take care of each other and remember that you're stronger than you know. Keep standing up for yourselves no matter what." They hugged him tightly, a moment of connection that spoke volumes about the bond they had formed. Then, with a wave and a promise to stay in touch, Lena and Mariah drove away, their hearts light with triumph and hope. Daniel watched until their truck disappeared around a bend, feeling a mixture of pride, happiness, and quiet melancholy. Alone in the cabin once more, Daniel sat by the fire, reflecting on the past months. He realized that he had thought he was saving two strangers from the cold, but in truth, they had given him something equally important: connection, purpose, and a renewed belief in the goodness of people. Their journey together had transformed all of them, leaving lasting impressions that would shape their lives forever. The mountains outside were silent, the snow sparkling in the sunlight. Inside, the cabin remained warm, a reminder of the nights spent together, the challenges overcome, and the trust and courage that had grown between them. Daniel knew that he would carry the memory of Lena and Mariah with him always, a testament to the power of kindness, resilience, and human connection. In the end, it wasn't just a story about saving two sisters from the cold. It was a story about hope, courage, and the extraordinary impact of simple acts of kindness. Daniel had stopped his truck that night because it was the right thing to do. And in doing so, he had changed not only the sisters' lives but his own, proving that one decision, one act of compassion, could create ripples that lasted a lifetime.